So let's get started. This is our September Lunch and Learn. And today we are going to talk about backlog or story grooming. So the Finance Lunch and Learn, yeah, many of you have attended it multiple times. We do it first Wednesday of every month, and we have been doing that consistently for last several years on different topics on project management, leadership, agile, and certifications, things like that. So let's talk about this. What are your expectations from this webinar? What do you want to take away? If I were to ask, what is the single thing that you want to take away? What will be that? So you can talk or you can type in the chat box. Anybody? I'm not hearing anyone. Philip, is everybody muted?
Yes, everyone's muted, but everyone should have the option to unmute themselves also if you want to talk. Please let me know if you don't see that option. I see some comments in the chat box also.
Okay, so how do I see the chat box? Yeah, I can see the chat box. Let me see here. Yeah, Philip, how do I see the chat box?
It should be on your top menu under more options.
Yeah, got it. Learn more about handling backlog, learn how to manage work backlog better, get my beyond the next. Okay, better planning. Yeah, business requirement. Okay, very good, very good, very good. Okay, all right. So hopefully you should get your answers by the time we finish the workshop or the webinar. Okay, so what's new at RefineM? So we talk about our next webinar, which is on requirement gathering, which is linked to the grooming part. And then on November 7, we are going to do, you have done PMP. So what next? What do you want to next? I get this question from many project managers who have done PMP. And then we have several in-person and virtual PMP classes. We have BA classes. So a lot many trainings that we have coming up, scheduled. And we have several products, videos for you to learn Agile and other topics. And also if you're preparing for PMP, you have exam prep videos. Okay, so let's talk about Agile a little bit very quickly. So bring everybody on the same page before we go do a deep dive for requirements. Start with the manifesto, the 4 values of Agile. Is there anybody who has not seen or seeing it for the first time? I think most of you might have already seen this. So basically things on the left are more valuable than the things on the right. So that's how the value system of Agile works. Giving more value to people, um, something that works over documentation, collaboration, and responding to change. I think those are the things that are more valuable than the things on the right. So I treat this as a value system for Agile, like, uh, and then based on this value system, you have 12 principles. So they are kind of an extension of the value system, and you can go next level deeper. And these are the 12 principles which Agile teams uh, implement. And they implement these through uh, several practices. And subset of those practices are different methodologies like Scrum, for example. So, which is an incremental, iterative incremental framework. It has been there for a long period of time. And there are three basic pillars of Scrum: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Most of you who know about Scrum will know about this. Um, it's an iterative method. We also know about it. Um, and there are three primary roles in Scrum: product owner, the person who represents stakeholders, and is voice of the customer. He or she is accountable for making sure that the team always works on high value items. And then the Scrum Master, who is the process custodian, somebody who facilitates, somebody who tells, okay, how the planning will happen, how the retrospective will happen. Even the part grooming that we are going to talk about today, the Scrum Master should be setting up a process to do the grooming, and we are going to talk about that process later today. So he or she is the one who is the process owner, making sure that there is a process for doing it, and people understand that process, and that follows from the principles and values. And then, of course, the teams uh, that are formed of generalizing specialists. So in Agile world, specialization is something that doesn't work. You have to have multiple skills. And if some of you know, for the Agile teams, we talk about the pie shaped skills, uh, the comb skills, things like that. A T type skill is like one primary skill and one secondary skill. Pie shaped means one primary and two secondary. Com shaped means one primary and multiple secondary skills. So more and more teams, Agile teams, are going towards the generalization. And you might have heard the term full stack Java developer, right? So what is the meaning of full stack Java developer? So full stack means that person will have multiple skills. In a simple term, like that means that person in the Java development will have multiple skills. They will be able to not do only front-end development, on only back-end development, on only this kind of development. They are multi-skilled. That's the meaning. And so generalizing specialists are the people who are the part of the team. I wanted to emphasize this because many teams have this issue of having highly specialized people, and then the development stories are passed from one to the other person on the team, and we have a um, loss of information or communication gap, and that pushes you to do more documentation, which is opposite of the value that you saw: less documentation, not more documentation. Any question anybody has? These are some of the basic things I wanted to cover before I go to grooming. I'll pause here for a minute or so to see if anybody has any questions. Okay, so it seems like we are doing good. So let's keep moving. And I always ask this question, what is the, what about the other roles in Scrum area, BA, QA, and PM? Um, does anybody has an answer for this? You know what a BA, a QA, or PM does on a Scrum team? Anyone? You can talk, or you can write in the chat box, whatever is your preference. Okay, I think people are on mute or don't want to talk about. Yeah. Okay, maintain project scope, cost. Somebody's talking about. I think that may be the Jamie. You may be thinking about the role of a PM. Uh, so so first of all, these I'll say these titles are not there, but roles are still there. Somebody has to do requirements. Somebody has to do testing. Somebody has to manage stakeholders and budget and all those kind of things. That still has to happen. So there may not be titles like this, but the work still need to happen. So either you can have some people designated to do this, even if it is not in an official Scrum roles, or you can have somebody in the team do this role without having a title for that person as a BA or a QA. The activities still need to happen, requirements still need to happen, testing still need to happen, stakeholder management, risk management, all those things have to happen. Everything need to happen. It's not that you don't stop writing requirements or you stop doing testing. It still need to happen. So somebody in the team picks it up and does it. Or you can have specific people, you can still give those names. So it's not that you cannot have them. You can still have them. Okay. All right. And then you are aware of Scrum ceremonies, planning and review. Planning happens at the beginning and review happens at the end to see what work got completed, what did not get complete, and then what happens to the work that did not get complete, or something if the team did more than what was planned. That's great thing. Some teams do that. So let's talk about the backlog now. So what is a backlog? So anybody want to say or type? What is a backlog? So I see you talking, Bolinen. Bolin, I see you talking, but I'm not hearing you. Maybe your microphone is muted. In the picture, I see you talking, but I don't hear your voice. I don't. You can type here in the chat box. Yeah, you can type in the chat box. Something is not working with your microphone. So what is a backlog? Anybody wants to respond to that? List of requirements are not included in the sprint. Task waiting to be completed. Okay, what else? Yeah, the most close definition is what Bala Subramaniam is typed here: prioritized item ready for development. So the key part is prioritized. I think that's what is most important. The difference between the uh, the uh, regular list and backlog. So it is a list of requirement, and that those are prioritized by product owner. So product owner is responsible for prioritizing those and to make sure that the highest value items are on the top. And there could be 3 levels within the backlog. Could be product backlog, release backlog, or sprint or iteration backlog. Or sometimes we will just call it just one backlog, which is also okay. There is nothing wrong with that. But you can see that why I'm seeing it 3 different levels, because that's where the granularity comes into picture. A very big item in the product backlog may be sitting towards the bottom of the backlog, the priority low, and very small requirements may be on the top and ready to be consumed by the team and ready for the sprint, and that may be part of the sprint backlog. So product backlog, what that contains? It contains almost everything. It contains themes, epics, user stories. I have not written down here features. And the items rise on the top of the backlog once they become high priority, and they are the bigger items will be broken down into smaller items, and smaller items are provided to the team. So that is all happens in the product backlog, or that is what product backlog contains. So in a nutshell, you can say product backlog contains everything that development team need to work on. It is prioritized. So the highest value items are at the top, and then lower value items are towards the bottom of the backlog. So you can think of, if I were to say level of backlog, so this is the entire backlog, product backlog. You can see it as one big thing, or you can also say, okay, out of this total backlog, I have 2 releases that will use, or the team will use, to complete the development of all the items in the backlog. So that gets split into 2 releases, and for each release you have a backlog. And then you can say, okay, for each backlog, this release 1 will have 5 sprints, and release 2 will have 2 sprints. Okay, so each of the part of the backlog that is in the sprint becomes the sprint backlog. So the sprint backlog will have a detailed requirement ready to be consumed by the team. The release backlog initially developed may not have all the requirement at the same level of detail. For example, if it has 5 sprints over here, right? So let's say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So the something that is coming in sprint 3, 4, and 5 may not be as detailed as is sprint 1. Okay, so that is what is the distinction. So you may not have moved the items that are going to be in these 3 sprints to the sprint level queue, if you will, unless it is so much so much manageable or small that the team can pick it up, or fully fleshed out. So unless that happens, that stays at a higher level, or more coarse level, if you will. And there are some of the examples of the backlog. You can have items, you can have effort. Sometimes teams put it in hours, sometimes they put it in story points. So whatever sizing works for you, and then priority, and then what release they will go. So those are some of the important attributes of the requirement within the product backlog. This is what you're saying is one of our templates in Excel. Keep it very simple. Or if you use a tool, You can also create a backlog in a tool. I'm showing the example of version 1 tool that we use, and you can see the backlog in this. All same things. They have a story points also, and you have detailed estimate of hours and which sprint. And the sprint is not 1 to 3. It's basically with the date. So you can say, okay, the sprint is starting or ending on this date, and you can put that sprint with the date. So whatever works out for you to identify a backlog item with a sprint is fine. Okay, and what sprint backlog will contain? The sprint backlog is the output of the planning meeting that we do, and most of the time it will consist of tasks. So for the stories are broken into tasks. And once the teams become highly mature and they don't have to break that into tasks, or it is a multidisciplined developers are part of it. So one person take a story and finish it end to end without giving it to somebody else. They can do the requirements, they can do the development, they can do the testing, they can do whatever needs to happen to complete their story end to end. That requires some time to get to that level. Most of the teams, when they start Agile or Scrum, they are not in that position. They are still having a specialized people working in the team. So the stories have to be divided into tasks so people can do their tasks. Sometimes those tasks could be parallel, sometimes those tasks will be sequential, whatever way that is. So like writing test case could happen at the same time when the development is taking place or something like that. So different people may be doing different things. So you may need tasks for different type of work related to a story or related to a requirement. So in that case, it will be tasks. So that's why I'm saying here the sprint backlog is mostly tasks, and it will have the estimate mostly in days and hours for the tasks. That's how a sprint backlog may look like. So it's mainly the tasks. Okay, any question on difference between the different levels of backlogs? And then we will jump into the grooming part. Any question on related to the product backlog, release backlog, and sprint backlog? And you may put them in different places, may have different tabs in the spreadsheet or in the tool, or you may just have flags that go. If you're using a tool, like Jira or ZenHub or any other tool, you can just use some labels to say, okay, this is a story, and this is a task, and this is part of this release, or this is part of this sprint. You can do all that. Okay.
I have a question. Will the presentation be made available after the webinar?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so going to coarse grain versus fine grain requirement. So when I talk about coarse grain requirement, those are high level summary of what needs to be delivered. So that part is a high level part, and when they are bigger in size, then their estimate may be higher in number and more number of story point. Or if you are doing a t-shirt sizing or a bucket sizing, then they may be large or extra large kind of a size, and it will be difficult to assign a time estimate, like it is not detailed yet. So the technical team may not have enough inputs to say, okay, this is how much it will take. So it is a very high level big kind of a requirement. And usually these kind of requirements will sit at the bottom of the backlog because they may not be high priority. Once they become high priority, then they start getting into the fine-grained requirement. So they are low level and likely to have lower story points, such as 5, 8, or maybe 13 at the most. And they will be at a level that you can assign a reasonably good estimate of time. So those will be called as fine-grained requirement, and coarse-grained will be the larger kind of requirements. And if you want to see in picture, this is how a backlog may look like. You can see the big blocks here saying, okay, these are the big requirements that are not detailed out. And then the grooming starts. So what grooming does, grooming actually turns a backlog in this shape to a backlog in this shape. So where you can see the top level requirements are now fine-grained. So they are small and they can be consumed by the team, and they can start working on those. One of the things that I have seen that many teams do not spend any time in grooming. They take this part and go directly to the sprint, and then they start figuring things out during the sprint. And the result is that they may have partially completed stories in the, at the end of the sprint, and they may not be able to do any kinds of measurements like velocity or things like that are helpful in demonstrating that teams are getting better and better and better. So the grooming is very, very important, and grooming is all the pre-work that the business side needs to do. So that's what is important, that the business side needs to do before the requirements are presented in form of small stories, not more than 5 or 8 story points for the best practices to the team. And why I'm saying 5 and 8 story points, the reason for that is usually many of the teams, when they start putting story points, they normally go for saying, okay, if it is something that we can complete within a day, we'll call it 1 story point. That is how they define a story point. So based on that, if it is a 2-week sprint and you have anything more than 8 story points, most likely you will not be able to finish. So I'll say that if your measure is 1 story point is up to a day of work and you have 2-week sprints, do not have stories in your backlog that are more than 5 story points. When it comes down to that level, then it's ready to be consumed in the sprint. Otherwise, you have to keep breaking it down into smaller chunks so that they can be independently worked and completed. Sometimes you have, when you try to break the stories down, then it so happens that they become dependent. And to some extent, that's fine, because there are, that dependency is limited to 1 or 2. But if that dependency is limited, like 5, 6, or 10, then it becomes a problem. And that's an art. That's a skill that is not easy to come by. It comes with reading, teaching, or training, and practicing. So it's a skill. It's like any skill that you need to develop. If you don't know that skill, for example, if you don't know how to ride a bicycle, riding a bicycle is a skill. If you don't know how to ride a bicycle, you need to practice. You may need a trainer or somebody who knows how to ride a bike to tell you how to ride a bike, maybe help you riding the bike, and then you start riding the bike. So it's a very similar thing. And I have seen many teams do not even know how to do backlog grooming. So let's look at some of the steps that requirement goes through to complete the grooming part. And this will explain you what is the meaning of grooming. Okay. And I have put together this what I call as value stream map for backlog grooming. So let's try to understand this part. Uh, so let's say when you come up with a requirement, it may be of very big size. So whatever that size or shape is, uh, the the product owner will prioritize that based on the business value. What is the value that this requirement is delivering to the business community, user community, or the stakeholders? And based on that, it will get prioritized and put in the backlog at the right level. Once that is done, then the first level of sizing happens, which is, I call it t-shirt sizing. So you say, okay, this is small, this is medium, large. Now, this sizing is mostly done by business with product owners with no or very little technical input from the technical team. And initially they may not know much about it, but as they do more and more, they will learn. So estimation is also a skill, and it can be developed. No question, okay, about it. So and teams need like business and product owner really need to sit down, maybe Scrum Master, and decide, what's the meaning of small and medium and large. So they may come up with things like, okay, if it takes a month to develop, or maybe a week to develop, for example, let's say up to a week or up to a sprint. If it takes up to a sprint, then we'll call it small. If it takes 1 to 4 sprints, we'll call it medium. And if it is more than 4 sprints, we'll call it large, or whatever that definition is. You come on an agreement with the definition, and then take the requirement that's in the backlog and try to match, where that goes, which bucket or which size it goes. Does it go to medium? Does it go to large? And somebody may come up with that idea, oh, it's actually really very large, larger than the large. It may so happen. So when you encounter such situation that you find a larger than the large, then you create one more t-shirt size called as extra large, right? And you put that in that. It says it's really, really very, very big. So you can create that size. So this is what happens. This is the next stage of grooming. So first is you put the backlog with the value, and then you do the t-shirt sizing. But if there's something really very small that you can do, within a sprint or so, you may label it as a story, because you can be finished within a sprint. And other requirements can be labeled as epics, because those are the bigger ones. So that's next thing happens, that you start labeling now the requirements, and then take bigger ones if they are on, higher up in the priority. Then you start breaking those into user stories, and then those user stories are reprioritized, because now one epic large requirement may be broken into 5 or 10 small stories. And if you look at those stories, they may not be of same priority, right? They may be of different priority. Maybe the 4 stories out of those 10 is really high priority, and maybe 4 of them are very low and 2 are somewhere in the middle, okay? But they get reprioritized again, because now they are broken into stories. They are its own thing. You can still link them to epic, but now they are stories. So they have to be reprioritized based on the broken up requirement or the more detailed requirement. And once the stories are reprioritized, you come and you start detailing out stories. You flesh out more details, acceptance criteria, and all those kind of things. Maybe you describe different scenarios, how it should function. Maybe you create, you start thinking about, will I need a user UI for this? Will I not need? All those kind of things. So you start detailing out those requirements or those user stories. They're still user stories, And with every use story, the details are added and acceptance criteria is added. And so far, whatever is happening until this stage is mostly done by the business and POs, mostly done by the business and POs, and PO is responsible and accountable to bring it up to this level when the stories are fully fleshed out. Now, after the stories are fleshed out, now you start including the technical team and the user experience team. So if your story needs one or more user interfaces, then you start involving user experience team, and they start designing the, doing the UI design, and how the flow is going to work, how it will look like, and talk about the user experience. And I have written UX here, which is different than UI. UI is user interface, and UX is user experience. So what kind of user experience you want to have? So there is a specialization in UX area, and everybody cannot do. Developers may not have that skill, or the POs may not have that skill. So there is a different skill needed to do a user experience design. So that happens. Technical design happens where you determine what are the technical dependencies, what kind of database classes and dependencies you have. So that all comes into the technical design and UX design. That's another part that's get completed, and then you do move to user stories again, and then you start doing estimation in user stories, story points. Sorry. So now you have enough input. Now this part of estimation is done together, the technical team and the business team and the POs, everybody together. The entire team together does this estimation. And this estimation is in the user story points. So each story is assigned user story points. And then they are, after looking at the user story points, they may get reprioritized again, because it is possible that a high value user story may have very high user story points. Maybe a little less value may have very small user story point. So the product owner will again reprioritize that based on user story estimates, and now that will be ready for the sprint. So you can see it has gone through several steps, right, from here to here, to make it ready for the sprint, make it ready to be consumed by the development team for the sprint. Now, if your team is not doing all of this, you know where this will be happening then? It will be happening within the sprint. And that's where that's what most of the team end up doing. They are not, if the Scrum Master is not knowledgeable, Scrum Master has not created a process, has not trained the team and not coached the team, then that's what will happen. And it will be a chaos and mess in the sprints. Nobody will know what's happening, and it may look like wild west kind of a field, and nobody knows what's going on. A lot of confusion happening. Things are going back and forth, and a lot of rework, a lot of defects, and the same fight. Is it a defect? It is a change. That same kind of dialogue will happen if you don't do this kind of grooming. I will talk about some of the hours and numbers that I have put here. But before that, I want to stop for a minute or so and want to take any questions if anybody has on the grooming process. So you can either talk or you can use the chat box to write your questions. Does your team do this kind of grooming? Is anybody here seeing this for the first time? Any questions? No, this is a real eye opener. Okay. I'm glad you found something very useful. Anybody else has any question, comments? What prevents this from happening? No, actually, it is not time. Surprisingly, Marcia, it is not time. It's basically not knowing what to do. Nobody in the team knowing what to do. That is that is what is the kind of a blocker, if you will. Time is not an issue. Actually, you will get more time and you will be more efficient and productive if you did this, versus if you did not do and your sprint becomes very messy and very confusing. So if you did this, actually you will save time. So I don't think it's a time issue. It is a issue of many times the people who are playing the role of a Scrum Master, they even don't know what to do. They even don't know how to set up the grooming process. They don't know. They don't know what grooming is. You know, so they just start the sprint, take the backlog, get into the sprint, and do the sprint planning and do the daily stand-ups, and things like that. And well, then some of the stories are so large that the team comes and they say, okay, we are working on story number XYZ every day. I'm working on it. And then the sprint is over and still working on it. So that is what happens. So grooming is very important part, and the best practice is that you should have stories worth 2 sprints ready at any point of times in this state, ready for a sprint, worth 2 sprints at any point of time. So when you go in the sprint planning stage, if your velocity, like how many story points your team delivers in a sprint, is 50, then you should have stories worth 100 story points in this state ready to go. And why I'm saying 2 is because 1, the team will take into the sprint and do it. What if your team is really efficient and they did more? So they can pick more from here because they're ready to go. They're not waiting for the details to be worked out. Now, this process may, as you know, Marcia mentioned that it may take time. So now I will come to the time analysis part here, which you see, at the bottom here. So roughly, I have seen that this is the rough time for doing each of these steps. So it may take a couple of hours to, write down the requirement, put it in the backlog, prioritize it, and then very high level sizing, probably 10, 15 minutes, you can do it. And then labeling probably should go very fast, 2 minutes or so, you can label it. And then breaking epics into stories, that will take some time. And reprioritizing them, that will take some time based on what is the size of the sprint. Another couple of hours go for that. And then detailing out the story, fully fleshing out the requirement and building the acceptance criteria may take up to 4 hours, maybe sometimes even more than 4 hours. If the stories are a little bigger, then it will take this. And then, of course, then doing the user experience design, doing the technical design for the story may take 6 to 8 hours or even more for each story. This is for each story, okay? And then you estimate a story in story points, probably 10, 15 minutes each story. It will not take much time. If you are in the beginning, it may take more time, but once you start using more and more planning poker stuff, it may take lesser. And then reprioritizing maybe another 20, 30 minutes to reprioritize So most of the time, actually, if you see, most of the time goes here, initial requirement, breaking into user stories, detailing out user stories, and doing technical and user experience design. So that's where most of the time goes. And if you add up all that green numbers, that's called as activity time. But this many times you have to wait for some time before you can go to this step. So I have put some wait time in between. So 0, 0. Usually once this is done, when you are ready to break into epics, take an epic and break, you may not start working on it. Most of the time there could be a 1-day delay. And then you can see how much delay is introduced: 1 day, 2 day, 1 day, 1 day kind of a thing. So that's the wait time. So if you add up wait time, that's 48 hours, and the total wait and the activity time put together is 63 hours. So that's about 8 days from starting from a requirement to completing it all through these 8 steps and reaching to a place where it is ready to be consumed by the sprint team. Okay, so 8 days, that's not significant, if you see the 8 days. But if you see here, I have calculated something called as process efficiency, and you can actually do that for any process. If you can create a value stream map, and you can see, okay, you can do some time analysis. You can come up with the process efficiency, and process efficiency is calculated by activity time divided by cycle time. So in this case, it is about 24%. Now, what does this indicate? And now this is a very important figure or very important number for all Scrum Masters to know who are helping the teams with the grooming, because you want the grooming to happen fast. Somebody said that it takes time. So the time it takes is because you are working only 24% of the time, you're waiting for 66% of the time. So that is what process efficiency says. Your work is only 24%. The remaining 66% time waiting. If you can cut down the wait time, then you can actually do the grooming in almost 4 times faster. So the time and the waiting, why that waiting happens? That waiting happens because everybody is working on multiple projects, right? Everybody is working on more than 2 or 3 or 4 projects. So they have to start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. And that's where the waiting time comes. Like if you are done with the story now, you have to get a technical lead. You have to get a user experience lead. They may not be rightly available because they are working on 5 different projects, right? See, I have just put 2 days. Sometimes it may be like 5 days or 10 days you may be waiting. So if you create these steps and do some time analysis, then you will really know where it is going. And you can actually work on reducing or eliminating the wait time so that you can do this whole process 3 or 4 times faster. I wanted to illustrate this some example. These are and this is not the numbers from the sky. This is what I have seen in my experience. This is what I have seen that happens. In some cases, it may be the process efficiency may be less than 5% even. I have seen those. So once you have this kind of knowledge about this is what grooming is, this is how grooming happens, and this is how we can make grooming more efficient, then it's very fast. It's very, very fast. But I can tell you there are many Scrum Masters who have no clue about it, had no clue about it. And they are not able to help the teams. Some have. And the ones that have, they do the grooming well, and their teams are much more efficient, and they have very less rework, less number of defects, less number of rework, and changes. And the changes on the one side, the Agile team says, okay, you have to accept changes from the customer, and that's fine in agile world. But sometimes the changes frustrate the development team because they see it as some extra work that is coming up, just because of the mindset. They're still the waterfall mindset. But the more the rework part, the lesser the efficiency, lesser the predictability, and the team morale and all those kind of things. So now, if you do not have these estimates and all that, that's okay. You can, these numbers, the time analysis, you can have some guess and put it there. But then what you do, the next step is take this value stream map and convert this into a Kanban board. Each state goes as a column, and see how your requirements move one column to the other column. If you're using tools that can provide you the time analysis, that will be wonderful. I know about a tool called a Swift Kanban that provides you this analysis very well. Okay, I don't know about other tools, if they provide you or not. So if you want to do it manually, that's fine. But I think even if you don't do that, even if you have this guess of the time analysis, and you do this guessing every 3 months, and your focus should be, let's reduce the wait time, I think you will be able to achieve the same thing. Maybe it's not a true number based, maybe it's a gut feel based, but I think that's okay. That's not too bad. Okay, any more questions? I finished the time analysis also. I'll keep scrolling to the next slide, but if you have questions, stop me. So these are the steps that I just went through. Grooming is the regularly done. These are the best practices of grooming. PO should work with customer and development team, should be done on a regular basis. So this is not done one time, because every time, constantly you have to have stories fully groomed up to 2 sprints. That's what is the best practice. So it has to happen on an ongoing basis. It cannot be just one-time activity. So that is all I want to talk about the grooming part. I hope that you were able to get some ideas from here and will be able to implement those ideas in your teams. Now, let's talk about our next webinar. It's coming up on 2nd October at 11 a.m. and this will be through projectmanagement.com. And you can register for that. You can go to their website and register for that. It's coming up, and there we'll be talking about not just grooming, the business requirement gathering, how it is different from waterfall to agile. So we'll be talking about that. If you want to learn more about agile, we have videos. It's about 10 to 12 hours of video recording in smaller chunks, like 1.5 hours videos. And you can subscribe. These are all my videos, and we recorded those, and you can see those. Our next online training is First Steps Towards Agility, and we are doing in collaboration with KCPMI chapter. So if you go to their site, you can register for this half-day training on First Steps Towards Agility, incorporating agile practices in a waterfall environment, and you can register through them. And then we have next in-person training in Springfield on leadership skills for managers. So we'll be talking about soft skills. So if you are in the Springfield area or nearby, and you can come for a day on October 10th, we are doing the leadership skills for project managers in Springfield. And then we have several PMP classes that are coming up. You can go to our website and look for these classes in different places. Okay, this is how you will get one PDF. Okay, and this slide deck will come to you. so you will know it. But this is how you claim 1 PTU for this this webinar. And we do star attendees. Somebody attends our webinar 3 times in a row, they get $10 Amazon gift card. So this month's webinar is Mustafa. Mustafa, you will get your reward in next couple of days, a $10 Amazon gift card. Congratulations to you. Okay. Thanks a lot for attending, and you will receive, if you have registered, of course, I think you joined the webinar, so you would have registered. So if you are registered, you will get a copy of this slide deck, and the recording will also be available in a week or so. Thank you. Bye.